My name is Paul Elias, and I am an unreal journalist, but also technical artist who has been working for many years in not only virtual production, but mainly automotive, but at the same time doing VR and AR game development for a few companies. And my main interest at the moment is not only being technical artist, but I'm also working in CG Spectrum as a mentor. But at the same time, I'm also now collaborating, but getting more into creating courses for CG spectrums. The first computer I had, I was 7 years old, and when I look at the idea of playing games on it, I was basically pretending I'm sick. I didn't go to school just to play games and all that. Ever since I started playing games, I never came back to being a normal person. So as a teenager, my idea was to become a robotic engineer, so create robots. So I went straight in, got to the university, and I remember like when I went to the robotics, it just happened that there were cool people, and at the same time I was doing some interesting stuff. So it's interesting enough at that time when you were doing robots, you were actually constructing them using Lego blocks. So you do Lego blocks. We programmed this little bit like this special console where you fit in with all the other sensors to that, and you program sensors, and you basically calculate. It's like playing the game. We just instead of doing this in 3D or like 2D, you program all the movements and anything that relates to the computing the motion of the robot and the decisions making, right? And we were introduced to C++ at that time, and then got into Java a bit too. But it's just surprisingly, I remember when I think it was 3 weeks in, and some guy turned up to our lectures, and I remember after our lecture, he comes to me and asks me a question. Oh, is that the computer animation course? I was like, what do you mean computer animation course? Does that mean that university offers this course? It's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I remember that time I had this epiphany, and I was like, no, this is not my place. I need to switch quick. So I remember doing this, and I don't know. I just felt like I want to do something more computer animation, but also technical animation because I also like a bit of scripting and programming too. And I remember at that time when I was into this course, I remember when I graduated. Um, I was one of the first people who got a job at this industry, but even though I didn't do anything relates to animations or anything like that, I was still a 3D artist, but I was mainly for research and research in a way to develop the libraries of photoscanned objects that comes from archaeological sites. I also did for paleontology, so we used to have like mammoth tusks, like rhinos and very cool stuff. I was doing for I think 2.5 years, and for some reason, because of this, I fell in love with the idea that when you scan something with the very high precision, scanners, we were faro lasers, because that's how I learned how to use faro lasers as well, to the nanometer, and you thinking to yourself, this is future. I just, for some reason, I thought to myself, this is something what computer graphics kids gonna get into, and I started doing masters. So I went to Goldsmiths. I went to London, and I was studying computer games entertainment, I think it was. So it was pretty much purely programming. And that was interesting. Of course, I struggle a bit because there are some people who've been in the program for years. I only been programmed for maybe a year, like these kind of stuff. So, I had a bit of help. At the same time, I learned lots of cool stuff. I was just still using Unity because, first of all, it was easier to use. But second of all, was just because I could prototype very quickly. So that's why I got myself into VR, because it was a new trend for VR. So I've been doing all VR stuff myself, and to the point where I was looking for a job, and so finally I got one. Like, it happened to be ironically in Unity. I work for Unity. After that, I just got fascination of creating my own little company, studio, and how to create not only applications, but also get into more 3D stuff. I decided to go and work for these small startups, because usually the idea of how you want to run a company is to see how startups works. So I got into the startup world. I started getting into more of cool stuff, using HoloLens, mobile apps, and so on to create AR as well as VR. Not only application, but also games. I was pretty much focused on that until to the point where I got employed to work for one research, and it was actually a product later for people with mental health diseases, in this case, psychosis. So I was one of the architects who developed the of using the workshops with people who were suffering from psychosis. Game Changer VR was created by Oxford. We were a collaboration with Oxford and NHS. This is where I literally stood out in terms of like, okay, this is where I put all my VR abilities, and why not try something else? And I decided to also help in this, but also on the side, I was like heavily learning Unreal. So I start crafting things. I start really, like getting into Unreal seriously. To a point where I was doing my full time job as a VR as well as AR, not artist, but also technical artist. It's just happened that I turned more technical artist eventually. I was just really focusing on creating great demos in Unreal, like VR purely, photorealism. And it happened to be automotive as well. I knew how to create photorealistic visualizations for VR. I think after 3 years, just before COVID, around 2019, I started getting noticed. I sold my 1080 Ti, even though I was a bit regretting it was a really good graphic card. But ray tracing is the new beauty in the field, and I need to use it. So I literally bought this graphic card with the money from 1080 Ti, and I was getting really amazing results. Like literally, people start noticing. Lots of agents start calling me and stuff. How did you do that? Oh wow! And I remember I sent this demo to Epic Games, so they have their own automotive team. And I was talking with Simon Jones, who was the director of Epic Games, and he was also interested at that time in automotive. And I remember at that time when the Dark Wolf invited me to also to Munich for the build 2019 automotive. And it happened at that time, at the same period, I was also approached by a team of guys who specializing in pixel streaming, web streaming, and they call Pure Web. And it became friends, and to the point where even they employed me as a consultant for many years. But prior to that, we kind of together formed this idea that we can present this demo in a configurator with the ray tracing capabilities, which was my first demo with Bugatti. And I don't know why I was called later Bugatti guy for some reason. It's like so strange. That's the Bugatti guy, right? Oh yeah, that's the Bugatti guy. Yeah, yeah, that's me. I got to the build in Munich, and I remember the first time when I saw my Bugatti Pure we were doing together. I was like, wow! It was literally the first seconds of that video started. It was my Bugatti. And I'm like, wow, I've made it, right? And it was like hundreds of people sitting around. So and I remember that time, and that's what I'm very happy. I was blessed that Epic Games created this super surprise for me as well. And I remember when I was talking to Doug and Simon, they was like, yes, we did it for you. So like, we did it the first few seconds so that people can see what you've done. It's like, wow, that was like breathtaking, yeah, at that time. So I remember this moment. And then ever since, I started getting lots of contracts. And of course, COVID took place, and it was a bit nasty. But our kitchen was so strange because for 3 months, because I was already getting not only contract, but also I was invited to showcase, and I was even showcasing one of my demos with collaboration with other team. I think it was Moses with Moses to showcase some of the demos with my Bugatti because everyone was just crazy about Bugatti for some reason. We showed this also on Unreal Academy, and that's where I was getting more notice as well. So, and I remember like people reaching out to me, just coming to the booth, and they were saying, "Oh, can you provide training and stuff?" So, okay. And I remember I went to do training. I was teaching like people in Berlin how to use Unreal, so cool. And it was virtual production mainly. I started working with Bentley, and I think I worked with them for like a year and a half maybe. And basically, I did for Kia, I did for Hyundai, some of the projects on agency work wise. So for the cars automotive, it tend to be 80% of the time was visualization. So I did visualization using Unreal Engine and happened to use Unreal 4 as well as 5. I did a technical art as well for creating not just tools but also like sophisticated materials and shaders to so that it can really work for different platforms like VR or not just visualization but mainly VR or like web streaming and so on. That was my forte at that moment. Also, I did for products. I also did for some medical devices too. Yeah, I started more getting into trainings because I noticed that most people they got no clue what they're doing, and it just happened that people like reach out to me, "Oh, can you help us?" And how you dealing this in the virtual production space, but also visualization, but also set up like very cool tools, but how you create your own tools that are dedicated for virtual production space. I just never thought like in a million years like someone's gonna come to me asking me from top industries like how did you do this? We need this and that. It's like, oh wow. It's crazy. It's cool to do all this freelance work and stuff, but there's a point where you just feel it's enough. You just feel like it's keep chasing something, but just don't have time for yourself. I always feel like you need to also show something, and you wanted to start working on your true passion. When I start my day, I start off with a really nice walk outside, come back, have a nice coffee. Sometimes it happens that I make a really nice sandwich and write things down, notes, and on what exactly I want to do throughout the day. And that also includes the maybe projects or some educational content I'm creating on. And I'm pretty much putting all this bullet points of what I've organized for today and to action to see how much I can basically do within a day as a unreal person, basically. So I always have to keep an eye on what kind of quality of content it is. And you always believe that you want to create all this stuff in one day, but don't always be too positive about it because it doesn't work that way. You always have to keep it like a very realistic manner, be positively realistic. So trying to work something that you can do. So at least maybe trying to maybe prep the content you want to work on, maybe prepare visuals. And once you are reaching towards the end of the day, which happens to me around, I have to say 10 p.m. or even 11, I tend to just close it and then wake up for the next day. To be honest, what I like about being Unreal in general is that I have flow of my imagination that I can always to use to not just create a content but also come up with the new solutions. It just happened that I do art, but most of the time, actually, I do more technical. So I always come up with some cool tools that I can create myself. I think the best tip of advice, which I would definitely give to people, especially entering the field, let's say I'm in, or any field you want to be, including Unreal, is to always be thankful of who you are and also listen to the advice to those who really are good, like literally better than you. And don't take entire advices. Sometimes you just take maybe the 50% of advice because we work different. And then maybe that advice is great, but it's just you don't follow the guy's dream, you follow your own dream.